everybody
Here
doing?
we go.
Doing good.
I'm feeling good. Excited
Good,
to
good.
talk Nuggets. Happy to have you here. And if you're listening, welcome to Four Corners, the number one bi-coastal Nuggets podcast in the universe. I am your host, Ray. You can find me online at Ray Von Hackshaw. You can find Peter at Bucket Since 88 and CT at CT Phasio 24. The draft is over, so that's nice. We've made it. I'm starting to feel some optimism, and I kind of wanted to jump into. I mean, we all know the Deron Holmes pick. I think we're all varying levels of excited about that. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about Trey Alexander and PJ Hall, the kind of impact that they might be able to have. So, CT, I actually want to throw it to you first. We can start small with PJ Hall. How do you see him just in terms of? Do you think he will see time with the team at all, and do you see him as an NBA player?
I would say first off, thanks you guys for having me on. Always
Of course.
great, breaking it down with you guys and talking Nuggets and everything. So, but yeah, especially with Hall, I think for me, he was a college player who was pretty established over the years. Took Clemson pretty deep into the tournament this year, into the Elite Eight, I believe. Um, he's a guy who's an inside-outside threat. I would say he's a bit undersized for the five. I think he's around like 6'10 ish, like 6'9", 6'10.
I heard some
So I think
six
he's
eights.
yeah, some six. I would be. I think that'd probably be okay. Um, but yeah, I think Hall for me is like a inside outside big, could shoot, stretch the floor a little bit. Pretty good bruiser inside as well. Likes to throw around his physicality. Pretty decent passer as well. So yeah, I think he's an established college player and a little bit on the older side as well. So I think it's a two-way guy. I don't really think it's I think last year's signings were a bit worse. I think just because of like they were a bit older players, not really out of college yet. They were just kind of more players who had G League experience, and I think this year, kind of going more of the route of having more established college players. I think that's a better way to optimize the two ways. So, but yeah, I think I would be shocked if Fall gets minutes unless there's a major injury. I think to the front court, and we'll see what happens with Zeke Naji coming up. There was rumors today on Twitter I saw from Fisher's article that he, was in trade talks already. So, we'll see about that. But yeah, I think Paul Hall should be a fine signing and should be a pretty good G League player.
Okay, that's pretty solid. I do I like a lot of his. He seems skilled, and I
Hmm.
appreciate that.
Definitely.
Uh, little to your point, a little undersized. The foot speed, not maybe ideal
Hmm.
for NBA levels of defense. So I do wonder like what position he might play because he's a little bit smaller, but I don't know if he's really like a wing either. Um, Peter, any thoughts on Hall before we kind of slide over to Trey Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, I liked his game from what I saw. Especially offensively. I thought he really carried them to that Elite Eight appearance. CT. I don't know what you thought, but
Yep,
I mean, he
definitely.
was incredible in that game against Baylor. He was the best player on the floor, and they had a couple guys drafted in the first round. So, I know that doesn't always translate the exact same way because like Colorado had three guys drafted. Simpson was third. He was like, in my opinion, Pac-12 Player of the Year, and he had two teammates get drafted ahead of him. But you know, it all gets projected differently. But I think the main thing in his skill set that I like is the shooting. The way the NBA is going, you basically always need shooting. So if a guy can shoot, he's always going to have like a baseline level of usefulness. So I'm not going to sit here and like predict that he's going to become an NBA rotation player one day, but I do at least like the idea of like I've talked about this before about how I think it's the biggest, misnomer that oh, well, this guy's a sick athlete, let's draft him, we can teach him how to shoot. Like if you're already in your 20s and you can't shoot, like what makes me think you're going to learn it now? So the fact that he can shoot, it gives me something to work with, and then you kind of have to see like is he going to be able to be a good rebounder, positional defender, all that stuff. But with the way the Nuggets are trying to play and basically play 4 out, 1 in, or maybe even 5 out, which is kind of what we saw, with the Celtics and the Thunder and how they're trying to build teams now, is everybody on the floor pretty much has to be able to shoot. So I like that they picked a guy that's big and can shoot, which makes him easier to play with other guys.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I am as well. I'm gonna say 5 NBA minutes this season. That's probably my over under. I like him. He seems good. He's good at basketball. It's not. He's probably a 4. He's probably a 4 in the NBA, and we have a lot of guys who could play at that spot. So I'm sure he'll see. Maybe he'll see some time with the team, and maybe during that time with the team, he'll get on
Big
the
vote of
floor at the
confidence
end
from
of.
Ray.
Yeah, it's better. It's better than what we had before. I'll say that.
True.
Yeah,
Not a Huff guy.
it's not. Well, yeah, I'm not a Huff guy. It's not that he's bad. It's just a logjam at that particular position, and where I do think there's a little bit more space for someone on a two-way to come in and play is at the either like point guard or center positions, and maybe he's a center, but we'll see. But there's one guy I know who can play point guard, and it's Trey Alexander. I not the deepest expert, but I really like his, how do I put this, completeness as a player. I'm not saying he's amazing at everything, but it feels like he can do some of a variety of things in a way that I think if you're a two-way guy, that's what Denver needs. They're going to need a guy who can say, we need you to play defense right now, or we need you to take the ball out of Jamal's hands, or we need you to, you know, run the offense, or we need you to be a shooter. So I guess CT, I'll throw it back to you. How high are you maybe on Trey Alexander as a guy who can step in and maybe find a role in Denver?
Yeah, so I actually my hot take that I have here on the pod is that Trey Alexander is a better basketball player than Jalen Pickett. That's my opinion. Yep, that's my
You know,
opinion.
you know what I hate? I think you're right.
Yeah, I was about to say I hate to throw cold water on this take, but it's not hot to me at all.
Well, just hot compared to the people, the Pickett believers is what I'll say.
Right.
I've been scouting Trey for a couple of years now, so 3 years. He's been a prospect like on the radar for the past two or 3 years, I'd say. Junior at Creighton, I've actually seen him a bunch in person as well, being in the Big East. So I was actually at his game, Creighton versus St. John's this year at the Garden to scout. Him and Baylor Shireman, who won the first round as well. Dennis Jenkins from St. John's got a two-way contract, so a couple of those guys were on like the NBA radar. But Trey put on a great performance at St. John's this year, even though they lost. He had like 30 points. Was really carving up St. John's, and I'm just really high on what Trey could bring to the table as far as what the Nuggets need. If you look at what the Nuggets need, right, they need a guard who can play on or off the ball and hold up defensively, and that's what Trey, his skill set really encapsulates, in my opinion. He's a guy that could he would take the opposing team's best player and defend the opposing guard. So if you saw in the Big East this year, he would guard Tyler Kolek, who went to the Knicks in the second round. He would guard Devin Carter, who was a lottery pick as well, and against Providence, and he had a really great performance against him. Creighton versus Providence was a really good game at Creighton this year. If you guys want to check that out, to watch some more Trey. But I think Trey's a pretty good shooter. I think the number was a bit hit or miss, 34% this year, which is not, it's not great, but it's also not bad. And I think too, like, he played in a really motion heavy offense, which was, great to see. And again, like I said, I think he's a really good point of attack defender. He's like 6'3", 6'4" with a 6'10" wingspan, so he's got a pretty long wingspan. And I think with Trey is that he's a guy who's multifaceted, right? He brings a lot of things to the table. And again, I would say it's like a long shot to say that he'd be like a rotation player just because he's on a two-way right now. But my stance is that I wouldn't be surprised this year if you see Malone play him over Pickett, like we saw Gillespie play over Pickett last year. And that's just, I think, just me being a bit lower on Pickett's skill set in general. But I think Trey gives you more avenues for versatility off the bench because he could play on the ball a little bit as well. I think he could play on the ball if you put him with like a rim roller, but also too if you play him with Jokic, right? You don't need a point guard necessarily next to him, but I think Trey could fit in a lot of different areas the Nuggets need. When it comes to backcourt defense and it comes to playing Murray off the ball, I think he would. And he's a really good mid-range player as well. Like that was really one of the best mid-range players in all of college basketball. So I think that's a really great strength of his. And yeah, I'm just out of the two-way guys, he's the highest I am on all of them. So I think moving forward, like if he has to play this year, I wouldn't be panicking if he got minutes.
Do you that mid-30s 3-point percentage? Do you feel like he kind of had a really prominent role in the offenses he was running? Do you think it will adjust with a slightly different, maybe not play style, but hierarchy? The difficulty of the shots that he's going to get in Denver versus the shots that he got in college.
Yeah, I think with Creighton, he was drawing the opposing team's best defender as well. Him and Shireman were two of the most prominent guys on that team, and their point guard was not really a point guard who was getting into the paint as well. So their point guard, Ashworth, who's been undersized and he was more of a shooter, like a shooting guard type than a point guard. So we saw Trey this year. His usage kind of went up as well. He scaled up a little bit there, got a little bit more on the ball reps, which I really liked. He had like a near triple double this year too, which was great to see. But like I said, I just think he's a more multifaceted guard than what the Nuggets had last year. When it comes to Reggie, even now that he's gone, but Trey, he's a good rebounder for a guard, and he can defend. If you look at behind Jamal Murray last year, the Nuggets didn't have any guard defenders in the backcourt of the point guard spot in particular. So I think Trey kind of would be a great fit in that aspect and kind of an added skill set to what Denver was lacking last year. So I think, moving forward, he's not going to be a number one option, on Denver. He's going to be more of an ancillary guy, a fifth guy out there. So I think he'll probably get easier looks and be more beneficial for him. And I think we'll see, I think in Summer League 2 coming up as well, we'll see him kind of have a better shooting performance than what he showed at Creighton.
Interesting. Peter, I know, I'm sure you also watch more college than I do. So I'm kind of curious what you think of him as, how do you feel about him as a Malone guy in particular?
I mean, Malone loves winners. Everybody does, obviously, but the fascinating thing about Trey Alexander is when you watch his highlight tape, he's got a lot of the same moves that Jamal Murray has. So I think we would all agree that Jamal Murray is a Malone guy. So if you have a guy that comes in and plays similarly, I don't know why he wouldn't be a Malone guy.
I think he's a Malone guy. I do.
Yeah. I want your take on something because I don't know if this is like me going way too far, but I really do think that like guys that play in the Big East get a little bit like undercovered because it's not on ESPN. But 100%. We know that the Big East is a major conference. It's right up there with the ACC and with the Big Ten as far as like the best college basketball conferences. I mean, UConn's won the championship the last 2 years. Everybody knows that. But Creighton was a top 10 team all year. So yeah. I'm actually a little bit surprised he didn't get drafted because, Ray, what you really like about Trey Alexander is, the stats jump off at the page at you. 17.5 a game, 4.7 assists, 5.7 rebounds. And like CT said, he wasn't even the point guard. He's playing off ball and he's getting 4.7 assists a game. They really had a big three at Creighton. It was Alexander Shireman, who was drafted 30th by the Celtics, and their big center, I forgot his name.
Kalkbrenner.
But, yeah, Kalkbrenner, but he's a good player. And so it was very good to see like they were not a one-man show at all. They were like a really good team with like a big three, and Trey was the guard in that big three. Shireman's the small forward, and Kalkbrenner's the center. So even though he can score, he's not like a get out of my way, I'm going to cook guy. He's still playing in the flow. Creighton's been a great basketball program for like decades now. So it's very similar to Gonzaga and Kansas and how high I was on the Brown and the Strother picks because like these guys just know how to play. And I would put Trey Alexander right in there. Like I'm not saying he's the same type of player as Julian Strother. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just simply saying like I do think there is something for like adding guys that have won in the college level because they kind of know like what plays and what doesn't. You know, if you look at his freshman year, he played 26 minutes a game, scored 7.5 points. So he didn't like come out busting on the scene as like a big time player for them, but he obviously worked his way up to get better. So I think he understands like as a two-way contract guy, we're not asking you to come in and be Jamal Murray's replacement. We just want you to come be like a competent guard if we need you.
Right.
And I'm really excited that he's going to be able to, you know, like you said, be a Malone guy, buy into the system, learn what they're doing, and if things go well, I can see him being an NBA player for sure.
CT, with him having been in a system that included for them a great big man, a guard, and a wing, do you think that is going to translate well to, you know, giving those sorts of passes to Shireman? Do you think that might translate maybe to him having a better maybe floor with guys like Michael Porter?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think Creighton's roster was a lot of had to provide a lot of shooting this year. You know, you look at all their guys they had a lot of shooters. You know, Kalkbrenner wasn't athletic. I don't know if I say like overly athletic, but he was pretty big player. Like he's like 7'3". Really good defensive player of the year in the Big East. I think in back-to-back years. So again, I think what they had there was, and Shireman's not the most athletic guy. They did have a lot of guys who, like I said, were more shooting types, not really versatile enough. I think that's where they kind of went wrong in the tournament. But again, Trey, he led them to the Elite Eight the year before. This year, he went against Tennessee, which was a really good team with Dalton Connect, who went to the Lakers this year. I just think, like you said, Ray, I think Trey playing next to an MPJ and playing next to a Murray, playing next to a Brown and these guys, I think that the more athletes he plays with, I think the better he's going to look. And I think Trey's a pretty good athlete, albeit he's a bit more on the methodical side when it comes to his offense. You kind of watch his tape. I'm curious what you guys think. Like he's drawn a lot of Murray comparisons because Murray doesn't beat you with athleticism, right? He beats you with finesse and he beats you with footwork and he beats you with up fakes and outsmarting you, right? And I think Trey's kind of the same way in that aspect, but Trey's really good from the mid range too. So I just think what Trey brings to the table will be beneficial to what the Nuggets lacked last year, as far as, a defender. And if you wanted to, you could play him next to Murray in the backcourt. Maybe it's a little bit more of an undersized look because he's 6'3", 6'4", but he's got a 6'10" wingspan and he could take the other team's best guard and defend them. And I don't have the catch and shoot numbers offhand, but I do believe he's a pretty good catch and shoot shooter this year. And like we said, the Nuggets just need more versatility on that front, and I think Trey, at least as a flyer on a two-way, provides that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm A+ for me as far as if you're gonna pick up a couple of two-way guys and maybe imagine them playing in an NBA setting. I feel a lot better about that this year, maybe kind of what you alluded to than in the past, than some
Definitely.
years in the past. So shout out to Calvin Booth. I am so far so good in that sense.
Wait, I want to add one last thing about Trey before we move on.
Yeah, sure.
So his 3-point percentage in college, first year 28%, then his sophomore year 41%, and then last year 34%. So the 33%, he took 5.2 attempts a game and made 1.8. I think in the NBA, he's not going to have as much high volume. He's going to be more like that role guard that's going to get like wide open threes. So I'm confident that he can go back up to like 36 to 39% in that range. But his 2-point percentage is outstanding, 48, 47, and then 50% last year.
Yeah. Elite
So
to me, elite.
Yeah. So he's like a guy that knows who he is and knows like what he can get and what he's good at. So yeah, CT, if he was like 36, 37% from three, he probably would have got drafted. I think the off year
100%.
from three is probably what scared teams away.
Yeah. I mean, I was a bit shocked he didn't get drafted. He was a guy early on in the draft process I liked for Denver, at 28. But I do think that, once the board kind of shifted, it made its way out. He was a guy that I kind of slid down the board and thought that there were other optimal options. But like I said, getting him on a two-way deal, I think is a coup for Denver for sure. I'm interested to see how he plays in summer league too. Going forward. Obviously a little more ahead, but I do think he's got a chance to carve out a role, moving forward. If he, we'll see if he outplays Pickett or if he is one of the better guards, on the team. But I think moving forward, though, I think Trey's got a chance to play like I think Murray was out last year for 28 games, so I think you saw Gillespie kind of slide into that role. But I wouldn't be surprised if say Murray's out for injury maintenance or whatnot. You put Trey in there, I think it would look pretty good compared to what we saw from Gillespie last year.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. Is there anything else that you can think of that might? I mean, he seems like someone that I've even seen like in past years that he was rated a little bit more highly on draft boards.
Mhm.
Anything else that comes to mind as far as why he might have fallen as far as he did?
Yeah, I think some of it might be the lack of athleticism. Um, like Murray's not the most athletic guy. He's obviously gotten a little bit more athletic over the years, but
Mhm.
Trey's a little bit more of a below the rim guard. He's not really gonna. He's had a couple posters, in his career, but he's not a guy who's like has overwhelming athleticism. I think too that some teams maybe look at him as a tweener because he's like 6'3", 6'4". So is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? And I think he could credibly play on or off the ball. And I think too, like we said with Jokic, he could play more on the ball there because you don't have to necessarily be a point guard to play with him. Against in bench units, maybe he could scale up a little bit and play more on the ball. I think that's entirely feasible. But um, I liked when Trey ran on ball stuff this year. I really did. I didn't think that he was sped up. I liked a lot of his reads that he was making out of the pick and roll. Was able to hit the lob thread and Kalkbrenner a lot. Hit skip pass for shooters as well. So, but yeah, I think probably those were the two main reasons. Positional fit. Obviously not seeing like is he a point guard or shooting guard. And then probably some of the athleticism concerns there would probably be some of my concerns, and then the shooting dip this year as well, like Peter mentioned. So I think those are probably three of the main kind of reasons why he slipped down the board.
Okay. Well, I'm excited. I'm eager to see, like you were saying, what he can do in summer league, and
Mhm.
hopefully, I mean, I'm not to say that I'm down necessarily on Pickett because of it, but I think competition is good, and the better that competition can be, whoever does win it is going to be hopefully someone that can actually play basketball. So, um, the maybe to bury the lead a little bit, the biggest pick of the night, we got our guy. I'm not gonna lie, this is the I've been through a lot of drafts, and especially for the Nuggets, some of these drafts we've wanted a guy, and a trade happens, something goes awry, and we don't get him. Um, I want to start with that. I really appreciate that if you have someone that you like, talking about Calvin Booth, that he was willing to just get him, like go out and make whatever you need to make happen to acquire a player who you are confident in. But CT, I mean, have you? I'm sure you've talked about him a lot so far. Is there anything that you might? Let's start negative. Let's get negative. Actually, is there anything you might be concerned about with him going into next year as a potential borderline rotation member?
Um, yeah, I think of course like there's obviously because right now it's just hypothetical, right? To see like is he going to play? Is he going to be a seamless fit with the Nuggets? I like his fit. He's been my number one prospect for Denver the most of the entire cycle. Um, but yeah, I mean him playing the 4 and 5. Is he physical enough to play the 5? Is he mobile enough to play the 4? I think those are two concerns off the bat that we can kind of see. As kind of like off the bat concerns as well. So I think probably those two right there. Is the shooting real? I think the shooting's real, but if you can't space the floor, then how else are you going to add value? So I think those are probably some of the concerns. With Holmes off the bat, but I just think that he's too versatile of a player to fail. In my opinion, just scouting him over the past couple of years. So, but yeah, I mean, of course, coming into the season, there's of course some sort of skepticism. I think with all prospects, right? Even Brown coming into the year, his first year, people were skeptical about him as well. The shooting and things like that. But I think he panned out pretty well. So, same with Watson as well, right? There was some concerns about him fitting in and excelling, and I think in the regular season he was pretty good. But once we got to the playoffs, that was a different kind of story. But um, I think with Holmes, is he fills such a need that it's going to be pretty tough for him to kind of uh, to fail past what Zeke provided this year. So I think that with Holmes, I just think that his kind of inside outside ability um, just is something that the Nuggets just lacked last year, and I think it will be able to really help the Nuggets off the bench.
Gotcha. I mean, speaking about Zeke, Peter, there's a lot of consternation about comparing him to Zeke Naji. What ways would you say that he and Zeke are similar, and what ways would you say that they're different, if you think they're similar at all? At all?
Similar, I would say that I think they both do a pretty good job of like jumping out on the perimeter and moving their feet. Uh, whether it's to contain a big who can work on the perimeter or switch on to a guard. How I would say they're different, and one of my biggest frustrations with Zeke is like Zeke can't catch the basketball when it's like in range. It has to be like a perfect pass for him. Didn't really see those issues with Holmes, so that's nice. And then the other thing is like you never hear them talk about this on a broadcast or even really a podcast just because it's so boring. But like Zeke truly lacks one of the foundational skills of basketball, which is the triple threat position. CT, as you know, coaching,
Mhm.
triple threat is like the first thing you learn. If you never played basketball, what it is you catch the ball, and if you think about like when a guy's shooting a free throw, and if you were to freeze the frame like right when they bend their knees and are looking at the hoop and have the ball in front of them, that's the triple threat because you can pass, dribble, or shoot. And the reason it's called triple threat is because you have those three options, and because you are a threat to do one of them. Zeke catches the ball and doesn't look at the basket. So if you're never looking at the basket, you're not a threat, and they don't have to guard you. So there's too many times when Zeke catches the ball, and it's just like he's just looking to get rid of it hot potato style right away. And I get that they're not asking him to like go, dunk on somebody all the time, but it's like he just, it's almost just like he knows that he can't do it, right? And so that's the difference between him and Holmes. Um, Holmes, he averaged 20 points and 8.5 rebounds this year. He was Dayton's best player by far. But since you wanted to start negative rate, I will say like my biggest concern with him, I think the sheer size difference going from a mid-major conference to the NBA is a big jump, right? That's not a small thing, right? CT, I mean, how many other guys in
Yeah,
the A10 were like banging with him and actually holding him off? The good thing I will say is in their NCAA tournament game against Arizona, now, I not only thought that he held his own, he actually I thought was the best player on the floor. They lost that game because Arizona had like the next four best players on the floor,
right.
but they couldn't stop Holmes. So I was very
No,
impressed with him in that game. But I guess my main concern, Ray, would be like ego. And what I mean is when you're the best player on your team in college, it's still an adjustment to then go to the next level where they're going to ask you to be a role player. And I'm confident that he can do it. But when I say ego, sometimes the way a game unfolds is like you might have a bad matchup that night. Like, let's say, I'm trying to think who's like a really good backup center. Like, if we're playing the Magic and Mo Wagner is just like schooling him, he has to know, like, you can't take it personally, right? If he tries to go get that 2 points back on the other end himself, that's not like winning basketball, right? Um, you'll see that in like rec league stuff, but you have to know that like, hey, if you got scored on, you still just got to go and run the offense and try to play the right way. You can't be like, oh, this guy's taking it to me. I have to now, make sure I get those 2 points back. That's how DeMarcus Cousins played, and now he was like good enough to do that a lot of the time, which was kind of funny. But I'm confident that Holmes, from what I've seen, he's he's gonna play team ball. Like he still got his teammates involved a lot. He was not like a get out of my way. I'm just gonna score every time type of guy. But that would be my negative concern is like him. If he's not doing well in a matchup, is he gonna want to get that back versus being able to like forget about the next play and just last play and just move on?
Interesting. Um, I'm gonna make a comparison. No, don't overreact. But
Don't
I
say
feel
Zeke.
like I think between him, Duran, Zeke, and Vlatko, I'm optimistic because I think they're the same but different. If that makes sense. I I think Zeke is probably a better defender overall. He's a little bit more built. I like Duran as a help side defender, but maybe less so like one on one in the post. And I think I don't want to say that's a good thing, but the fact that they are each doing something that's valuable, but maybe a little bit different, and that it can mean Zeke doesn't have to do any of the things that Vlatko and Duran do. Like, we don't have to see Zeke in the pick and roll. We don't have to see Zeke in the post. We don't have to see Zeke running DHOs. He can kind of go back to where I think he's most comfortable, which is being in the corner and try to get your 3 point percentage up and just kind of stay out of the way offensively. And then on defense, come back and rebound. Come back and help rotate on defense, all these sorts of things. Because he does, if there's one thing I respect about Zeke is that he does work hard. You know, he's consistent in his motor and he has kind of the frenetic, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to do it really to the utmostness about him. That makes for a good defensive sort of switchable big. So all that is to say, I'm pretty high on Duran and just how he's going to fit with all of those guys. That you have some options now. None of them are necessarily centers, quote unquote. And maybe that's another thing. I don't think Duran is a center in the NBA. Maybe with some time and in the weight room and that sort of thing, he gets there. But I he's good at basketball. You know, I think that's the most important thing. I also think he's maybe, you know, you're talking about Peter, him getting accustomed to the NBA and maybe not having the same priority. I do think he's going to enjoy having better entry passes because that's something I think it was hard for me to judge because I didn't feel sometimes he would miss a catch or sometimes he wouldn't be in the perfect position to make a play after a catch. But a lot of times the passes weren't. Maybe they're a little bit behind him. Maybe they're a little bit low. Maybe a little bit high. Maybe he's not making the read that I would expect. So I think NBA playmaking is going to help him a lot in his ability to work out of the post and kind of be effective offensively. So 5 stars.
Well,
Yeah, I think it was definitely. I mean, the 5-star as far as getting Duran.
I'm happy. I mean, I'm total like at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with how it went.
Yeah, Nuggets got their guy, which was I think that was A1 priority. You know, going into the offseason. You know, albeit you have to trade your first and a couple seconds to get him. I mean, I'm not really too opposed to that. I think the Reggie stuff was a little bit more. I don't know if we'll get to that eventually, but I was kind of not a fan of that deal. Um, but with Duran, I think just getting him on the roster, they needed a better backup big that has some offensive capabilities between Zeke and DeAndre, who they just brought back as well. You know, since he just resigned, like those guys don't have any offensive uh, threatening ability. You know what I mean? Those guys can't put the ball on the floor. They can't shoot from the outside. You know, I know we were hopeful that Zeke could recover that, but I just think he's a sunk cost at this point, unfortunately. Just to you know, just be transparent about it with Zeke. But
Can
I
it
think it's
get
pretty.
worse?
Can it get worse?
We were talking about
May
this earlier. Like he can't shoot worse.
it can't shoot worse, but I just think he's probably at the worst right now. You know what I mean? And I think with
Yeah.
Holmes, it's pretty obvious from Boots' comments in the presser that he had that it's over. I think with Zeke, you know, Duran was basically drafted to be the guy as the backup. You know what I mean? And you know, obviously hindsight says that you shouldn't have given Zeke that deal. He did now, so he has to kind of get out of it. But yeah, I think the Nuggets got their guy, and with Holmes is I think he gives you the versatility to play with Jokic as well, which is something that Zeke can't at this point provide because he can't shoot. So with Holmes, he can stretch the floor. He's a pretty good rim protector as well, defensively. So I think it was an A+ move, and yeah, I'm looking forward to see how he plays in summer league. And maybe he could carve out a rotation spot next year. That'd be great. But I'm irrationally excited about the MPJ, Vlaco, and Holmes stagger lineup that I want to see next year. So should be fun.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Ray, I think now that we're going positive, the thing I like most about him is, CT mentioned the versatility. I have to give a shout out to Locked On Nuggets. I was listening to their show about him, and Adam said that he's a participant in like all things on the basketball floor. And it was funny because after that, Matt was like, "I don't think that nickname is going to take off, the participant." but it's true though. Like that's what I really noticed is that he plays basketball in a way that is like very involved, right? So I know I said I was worried about the ego earlier, but I can see why Calvin said the positive things about him that he said, because I like, call me crazy if you want. I'm not saying this is like an even 1-for-1, but when Jokic goes to the bench, if Holmes is playing center, I don't think the Nuggets have to change the way they play that much. Because CT, from what I saw in the film, he's getting the ball a lot at the top of the elbow, top of the key, and kind of being that hub. He's comfortable to having the ball up there. So I like him as a backup center option, if he's going to be playing next to Vlaco or somebody. My question though, CT, is since he was usually in that role, and Booth said that he views him as a 4, do you think that he's going to be effective in the dunker spot? Because he didn't really play that. Like, how hard do you think the dunker spot is to learn in the Master? Because I think Gordon probably plays it better than anybody Jokic has ever played with.
Yeah, I think Holmes is going to be great in the dunker spot. I don't think he's got like elite. AG has very quick bounce off the floor. Obviously, I think AG is just as far as an athlete. When we talk about the NBA, he's obviously in a different tier. Even though I think some of his athleticism has probably tailed off since the beginning of his career, he's still A1 athlete. Perfect Jokic fit, right? I think with Holmes in the dunker spot, I think he'll provide a different look in that aspect. I think he'll be able to play the dunker spot credibly. He's also taller than AG by a little bit as well. So I think that'll be a good look. And we saw against the Timberwolves, right? The Timberwolves just kind of outbattled us with size. I think Holmes is another guy now. If you want to go Naz Reid and Towns or whoever, I think you could play Holmes as like the 4 next to Jokic, and that might be a good matchup, right? I think Holmes fills a lot of boxes. He checks a lot of boxes that the Nuggets lacked last year when it came to their backup bigs. And even too, like Vlaco, that signing's not official yet, or I don't. Hopefully that goes through. I think Vlaco as well. Like the Nuggets just last year didn't have versatility off the bench when a starter was not playing as well, or certain lineups called for different circumstances. They couldn't turn to it. So I just think Holmes is going to be a really welcome addition in that aspect, offensively, defensively. But yeah, I think he'll learn the dunker spot as well. But I think too with Holmes, you could play a different style, right? Than AG, you can space him to the corner if you'd like. You can run him in different actions, double drag, or you can have Jokic throw the ball to Holmes in the post, because Holmes is a very good sealer on offense, where he can seal smaller players and smaller 4s and take them to the post and score on them, right? So I think there's a lot of added benefits to that, where Holmes could play in a different variety of ways, where, like I said, the versatility last year was kind of lacking. So I think all around is a home run pick, and hopefully he pans out. So
I think that's a huge point when you said he can kind of do a lot of what AG does, because I think in that Timberwolves matchup, whenever we saw AG get in foul trouble, that was a huge issue, right? Because they just didn't trust Zeke. So now we're going small. Now, at least if AG gets in foul trouble, it gives Malone another option to kind of stay big. Obviously they're different players, but at least we're not just going to get beat up if the front line is Jokic and Holmes in certain matchups.
Right. You can even play two. I think you could even play AG, Holmes, and Jokic. You know what I mean? If you wanted to. Even though I think the spacing would be a little bit cramped, but you could play bigger. You know what I mean? The Wolves deployed Towns, Reed, and Gobert at one time. The Nuggets, I think, like we said last year or this year, the versatility was lacking. They didn't have certain skill sets, and I think that wouldn't be a lineup I go to often or even at all. But it's a possibility. At least if you want to throw it out there, you can. So, yeah, I mean, Holmes coming in, of course, it's going to be tough to play off the bat. I think like given the minutes, considering all the young guys they have, but I think he fills a position of need where I think he's got a better shot at it than say a Strawther did last year, or even a Watson. Going into last year as well, where the runway was kind of clear for him. I think Holmes more so has the ability now to kind of gain minutes from just the dynamic in the front court.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think honestly we could do a really long episode. At least it's been on my mind of just all the different varieties of like weird and interesting lineups you could put together between guys like Flacco, guys like Holmes and Peyton, and
Yeah.
not Zeke, but maybe Zeke, maybe in like some weird. I've been thinking about it. But or in integrating Strawther, who I also think has a pretty decent amount of size and length for his position. I'm sure if we get to this part, it's still, the point guard spot, the backup point guard is undecided. Has Denver signed or will they sign another center? I don't know. I mean, they already have DJ, but in between all of that, like 2 through 4, I feel really good about the options that Malone has just as a chef for what he can put together. So, knowing that we as Nuggets fans are pretty happy with the draft, Peter, I'll start with you. I know you're happy with Denver. Is there anything around the league? We were talking a little bit earlier about the amount of players who we feel a little bit more mature, a little bit more NBA ready going to the West. Anything else that happened on draft night that stands out for you as far as just things that might be relevant to Nuggets fans or maybe just basketball fans in general?
Oh yeah. I mean, the entire Northwest Division got better. I mean, the Blazers were on the clock first in our division. They take Klingon at 7, who, as CT knows, was an elite rim protector at UConn, back-to-back champion, good finisher. Can't really shoot, but they're not going to really ask him to do that. He's going to be a very like if you don't really watch a college game, he's pretty much like a Derek Lively type. Not quite as springy, but like he's a traditional like rim protector, rim runner center. Um, the the Wolves made a big move. They move up to number 8 to trade with the Spurs, and they grab Rob Dillingham, who's like a jittery water bug type point guard that I think their Conley's plan there is to have him come in and learn under Mike Conley, and be like a bench scorer for them. And I thought it was a little odd just because they're so big and like why would you add this really small guy that's going to get picked on in the playoffs? But maybe they view it as like if they have Gobert and Towns and McDaniels behind him, they can kind of clean up a lot of Dillingham's lack of size. So that's going to be interesting. The Jazz took Cody Williams from Colorado. He's going to be a project. He's very talented. Obviously, his brother is a budding star on the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I think it's a good pick for the Jazz. He's got a lot of potential. He could shoot. He's a good athlete. He just needs to get in the weight room, and he'll be good. And then the Thunder take Nikola Topic from Serbia, who I didn't get to see him play a lot, but I did watch him in one game last year against USC when he went up against Collier and Bronny James. And I thought he was the best player on the floor by far. Like, this guy controlled the game. Like, I'm not kidding. Maybe this is like way too much praise, CT, but he reminds me of Steve Nash, like the way he plays. Obviously, he's hurt. He's not going to play this year. He tore his ACL. But great value for the Thunder to get that guy at 12, who was basically a consensus top 6 pick before his injury. I don't know if it was KOC, but somebody even had him like 1 on their board, I think. So the whole division got better. And then just a couple other notes for West teams. The Grizzlies got Zach Edey, who has basically been the best college basketball player the last couple of years. Massive 7'3" center from Canada, about 300 pounds. Good back to the basket player, good rebounder, gotten a lot better
Sorry
at
about that.
defense. And then the Lakers, they get Dalton Connect at like pick 20 something, who Gavoni said was the best perimeter scorer in college basketball. I mean, he's basically going to be able to step in and be a bench scorer for the Lakers right away. So most of the teams in the West got better. CT, I guess you can start with pretty much wherever you want on any of those picks.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with a lot of what you said, Peter. Klingen at 7, I think, was a great pick for the Blazers. They got to decide what they're going to do with Dayton and Rob
Yeah.
Williams now because they have a lot of centers now on the roster. But I think Klingen, especially in Portland, is a good fit. Wish he kind of went somewhere else, but I think that's good value for them just from an asset
I'm glad he
perspective.
didn't go to Memphis.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Edie, I think it's going to be kind of tough to gauge there.
Right.
I had Edie top 20 on my board. I had him like 17. I just think that the upside was too, especially in a class so bad like this. There was no reason to
Right.
really at the top. I mean, but there was no reason to at least kind of take a flyer on him. So
Right.
um, I
Well,
think
the
he'll
thing with
probably be pretty
Edie
good
is
there.
like, no matter what you think of him, he's so big that you can't get away with playing small against him, right? Like he's not one of those guys you can put like a Jared Vanderbilt on and like
Right.
survive. Really, you need like a real center to guard him.
Yeah, because I mean, his offensive game really improved this year, where you can dump the ball down into the paint. He
Yeah.
can he can kind of score and create for himself. But I do think he has a lot of defensive vulnerabilities on that end of the floor.
Yeah.
As far as playing him in space and pull-up shooters, I think in particular is going to give him some problems. But I do think it was a good pick for where they were valued there.
Yeah.
The Dillingham selection was interesting. I think Conley had a pretty good draft, albeit I was a bit lower on Dillingham than a lot of other people, just because he's a smaller guard.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, the Wolves have guys to compensate for that: McDaniel's and Alexander Walker, Gobert. So we saw that in Denver, though, in Conley's later years. He preferred the smaller guards and scoring guards to play. So looks like that's kind of a direction that he's going in again. And he got Terrence Shannon at the end of the first round, which he slid due to some of the off the course stuff.
Off court. Yep.
Um, but I think he was a good pick as well. So I think Conley had a pretty good draft. But with Dillingham, adding a guy who's that young into the mix, gave him future assets for. We'll see if that pans out. It's possible it does, possible it doesn't. But we'll see with that. And then what other pick did I like in the draft? The
The
Connect pick was a
Jazz,
good pick.
the Jazz got your guy
Um,
Collier. Didn't you have him like number 3 prospect?
I had Collier top. I think I had him 4 at the end. Yeah, I had him 4 on my
Okay.
board. But yeah, the
Yeah.
Jazz did a great draft. Cody Williams, Collier, and then they got Filipowski, which I don't know if you've been
Yeah.
reading about some of the stuff out there
Oh
after what
yeah.
she said. But Collier, Filipowski, and Cody Williams. That's like an A+ draft. Collier is a guy who was number 1 at one point in the pre-draft process. So
Right.
I think the drafts are just the Jazz are really good drafters. So I kind of like where they
Yeah.
went their
Oh yeah.
direction. We'll see what kind of point guards the Jazz. Maybe Chris Dunn will come to the Nuggets. Hopefully, that'd be nice. But yeah, Jazz had a fantastic draft, and then Connect going to the Lakers was a great, solid pick for them as well. Later down the board. So it was an interesting draft overall.
And I hate to say it, one team we didn't mention, the team that the Nuggets traded up with to get Holmes, they moved back to 28 to our pick to select Ryan Dunn from Virginia.
Yeah,
He was a really good defender. The Suns, they lacked defense last year, so he might get rotation minutes for them right away because Suns bench last year was awful. And then obviously they add more second round picks in that deal, which who knows what a second round pick is going to be, but it's like more like good job by James Jones, right? Because it's like they didn't really know or like probably have any guy that absolutely needed to get at 22. So it was worth it for them to move back and get a guy that was still going to be there. Like they probably would have been cool with him at 22. So they move back, they get Dunn and more picks to help Denver out, and they pay Dunn less because of the draft slot.
yep.
Interesting. Well, I do have one pick I did like for another team,
Okay.
and might not be relevant to everyone listening, but it's not a Four Corners episode if I don't talk about the Washington Wizards, who,
Oh my god.
I
my
actually like the Wizards draft. I'll agree with Ray.
long-suffering organization. I like their draft. I feel like for the first time in the last 5, I'm gonna keep it at 5 years. They haven't done anything entirely stupid with their assets and picks, and they haven't YOLO'd all of their money on a bad player. I mean, they have
You
Jordan Poole, but
closet
hopefully
Jordan Poole fan, Ray?
no. I mean, I'm hoping they get rid of him. That he's not a permanent Wizard. That he's not part of their future. But he did finish the season well for them. I'm trying to be optimistic for them. They got a center. I would say that's the biggest thing that they actually needed in the rotation. And yeah, shout out to them. Hopefully they can not be a dumpster fire. So as we kind of wrap up, as just like a general update, KCP still not signed at the time of us recording this on the 30th of June. How, Peter, I'll start with you. On a scale of like 1 to 10, what is your level of concern? 1 being low, 10 being high, just with his general situation.
Oh man. I guess I'll go 7. I mean, it's weird. Like I've sort of been operating under the assumption that he won't be back, mostly for financial reasons. I mean, well, honestly, like I guess that's the only reason. Financial and like second apron and all that stuff. You know, you lose your flexibility. I would like him back, but I kind of understand like if he's not back, then CB slides in at the 2. You hope Strother gets better. But a lot of this, Ray, is like a lot of this depends on who they sign in free agency. I know they won't get a player as good as KCP, but I do think that they can like still be okay and supplement if they get the right guys. You know, CT's been talking about Chris Dunn all off season. I like him. I'd be fine with DeLon Wright. I'd be okay with D'Anthony Melton. You know, somebody that can guard at least. So we'll see what happens. You know, if he comes back, I'll be happy. It'll be a surprise. But I think for the long term outlook, I understand them not wanting to go so heavy on a salary of a guy that, you know, if we're being honest, like he's a 5th starter, he's in his 30s. You know, there's always a chance if they gave him like 4 for 100 that goes badly.
Fair. CT, any thoughts in like the same way? Scale of 1 to 10, your level of concern?
Yeah, I'd probably say a 10. I think he's gone, unfortunately. Just from the Calvin's Booth comments after the draft, seemed to kind of confirm that, you know, unless he's kind of just saying that to say it, that I would see that he's gone. Um, you know, I hope that if he gets another contract in the ballpark of what the Nuggets could pay, I hope that the Nuggets don't kind of cheap out on him. Because if he gets 20 million a year, somewhere in that ballpark, I would personally resign him because the Nuggets don't have any mid-level contracts to trade at this moment. You know, they have all max guys for the most part, and then AG's number, and then rookie scale guys. You know, they don't have any mid-level contracts. So if you were to sign KCP to a $20 million deal, say he kind of you see the decline, right, and you want to start Brown after next year, you can just deal KCP and get an asset back. You know, and that's what we just saw with Reggie. Now we signed Reggie to that mid-level exception, and we had to dump 3 second rounders to him to get rid of him. And again, the Nuggets have just kind of been throwing around picks loosely now at this point over the offseason. So I think I'm concerned that he leaves. And you know, there's no bigger Christian Brown advocate than me. You know, I was, you know, the A1 advocate to draft him to the team. And I think he's someone who eventually has starter upside potentially. I think there's a lot of improvements that he has to make to his game in order to really compensate and be a good fit with the starters, with the 4 other starters. But um, you know, I think then the bench would have to get kind of a facelift there as well. Like you can't run Pickett as the backup point guard next year. I'm very adamant that that would be a disaster if you go into it next year with him as the backup solely without any other playable vet. Um, but yeah, I think KCP, unfortunately, from what we're hearing online, it seems like he's gone, unless Booth just pulled a rabbit out of the hat. But um, you know, we'll see in that aspect. And to all caution, all Nuggets fans that I've kind of said on the timeline today, like I don't think it's the end of the world if KCP leaves. You know, ideally you'd like him back because he's been a valuable member to a championship team, valuable member to a regular season team last year that tied the franchise record for wins. So I think a lot of people downplaying his impact are, I would say, off base in that aspect. But I do think that the Nuggets having their core 4 guys does still give them a chance to contend for a championship. Just has to be some of those workable margins, and the 5th starter slot would have to be carefully kind of constructed now, since if he leaves, you know, in the coming hours or day or whoever it is. But I think bottom line, him being on the team would be better than him off the team.
That's fair. I will say, kind of at like a 3 or a 4. Not to say that I don't like KCP. I think he is probably leaving. But I do feel really optimistic about what Denver has pretty much in the 2 through 4 positional depth area. I would love another veteran signing, maybe a guard, maybe a center. Not to say that again, Duran is not a big, but yeah, it would be nice to see more like reliable support there. But I also it's tough because I don't exactly. I also would like Malone to play Jalen Pickett. I'm not saying he needs to be the guy, but I need to see if he sucks or not. Because right now, I just don't know. I just don't know. Like, I don't know what he is. I don't know how good he is or is not. And I would like to know that before, and if he gets beat out by Alexander, that's fine. Or if he gets beat out by somebody else, that's fine. It's just, I can't go another year of just like, yeah, we drafted him. Yeah, we've got him on the roster. Yeah, he's here. Has he played 5 minutes of NBA basketball that's actually meaningful? No. That would be really frustrating for me, just in terms of just the continuity of the organization. I'd like KCP back, to your point, though. And if they could maybe get creative with how they manage, it's that combination of like how much money and for how long. There's a level where I would say I don't necessarily want to pay a guy in his mid 30s for, you know, 4 more years, 3 more years, something like that. But if it's reasonable enough that you can move it and you aren't anticipating a major drop off, I think you can definitely afford maybe the $20 million range. But we'll see. I'm open to it. Before you go, CT, do you buy the idea that Christian not starting would be good for the Nuggets in terms of his financial affordability going towards his extension?
I think that when we kind of look at it from a perspective of KCP leaves, I don't know who else would come into the roster that would be more of a fit to play other than CB. Um, so I think in that aspect he kind of has to start. But I do think if you could extend him early, then maybe that kind of will quell the number being higher. You know, if you see him kind of take off this year. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd be pro start KCP if I'd be pro start Brown if KCP leaves. I think defensively what we saw in the playoffs this year, and he was I think their best sixth man. This year in the playoffs, he was their best bench player throughout the playoffs. Very good in the finals against the Heat too. I think last year was hit or miss for him as far as the regular season was concerned, but I think that's more to say about kind of the bench lineups that Malone played, and he played a lot of the guys 5-man bench lineups, which hopefully kind of stops next year. But um, I think Brown brings a lot of good things to the table uh, as far as like being a fifth starter. I think he's got to improve, some of his attacking and decision making off the catch for sure. KCP is a guy he had like a one dribble pull up. He had some shots that he could hit. DHOs that he ran with Jokic. And Brown, I think defensively, I don't think he's a better defender than KCP. I think he excels in different matchups than KCP. Just how with the Wolves series, but that was more of a one-off. Compared to like KCP was pretty good in all the rest of the playoff series. So um, I think regular season wise, it should be fine. Playoff might be a different discussion, but that's why I think then you have to kind of look to upgrade the bench a little bit in the backcourt as far as adding another piece there. So, but yeah, I think maybe extending Brown early would be beneficial to kind of what the Nuggets have going on. But yeah, if he leaves KCP, I'd be all for Brown getting first crack at the lineup.
Either do you think they would be worse in that case, in a meaningful way, as a team?
Yeah, I think Brown is a good player, but he's not as quick and as good as getting around screens. So like against the smaller guards, we're gonna struggle more. KCP was so good against Steph Curry this past year.
Mm-hmm.
He did struggle in the Minnesota matchup. I think Brown did probably the best job on anybody of our team against Edwards. So in a weird way, if we lose KCP, I don't think it would really hurt us that much against the Wolves. It's going to hurt us against teams like the Thunder and the Mavericks and the Suns. So the team will be different and maybe less versatile, but I still think they should still win like, 53 to 57 games.
Yeah, that's fair. I probably land in a similar area. I think they'll still be really good. I think they'll just be different. It'll look a bit
Yeah,
different. Christian isn't as fast, but he's also 6'6". I
Right.
like that. I also
yeah,
think he's a little bit more aggressive, actually getting through the rim, drawing a few more fouls. I like that too.
mhm.
Anybody that understands and has internalized the concept of passing Jokic the ball and cutting, I think that's a positive. I think they could also use just more motion in the way the starters run their offense anyway. So um, I'm open to whatever happens, but I think we can probably wrap up here. It's a good hour. So any parting shots for you guys before we get out of here?
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting this week. To see. I think KCP's decision probably comes out the next day or two. I'd say. I think probably Paul George's news comes first because I think that's going to be like the domino effect to
Yeah,
see like where he goes. Because if Paul George goes to the Sixers, and I think that takes out a suitor for KCP in that aspect, so that might be a good thing for Denver. But I think that's kind of where it starts. But um, yeah, I think regardless if KCP comes back or not, I think the Nuggets are still contenders. Ideally, I would have liked them to sign him if he doesn't decide to come back. So hopefully he does, and then Nuggets can kind of run it back for another year and make some more bench upgrades in free agency as well, and see where it kind of goes from there. But should be an interesting off season though for what they have going on. I think it's pretty important off season for them, especially after last year's playoff run. So I think moving into next year they have to be pretty specific about who they bring into the bench. And if KCP leaves, then they kind of have to have an upgrade on that front as well. I did see though if the Pacers get KCP in a sign and trade, then they'd have to trade somebody else. So if the Nuggets could get like a Mathurin or a Neesmith, I think that would be really good for Denver. Maybe a slight drop off, but I mean Neesmith was really good in the playoffs this year against the Celtics. I think Mathurin too was he's still a younger player, but I like what he brings to the table as well. So if the Nuggets could kind of bring one of those guys into the fold, I think that'd be really nice consolation, if KCP departs. But um, yeah, I think the draft was a good step for them, and hopefully summer league will be a good time to see how they perform. So I'm looking forward to it. Should be good.
yeah, I do agree. Getting something for KCP would just be really nice. I understand not re-signing him, but just not letting him walk for nothing. That would be great. Um, and I do agree that this summer is pretty big for Denver. I think both from a roster construction perspective, but also, something I'm going to be, not that I have any like insider knowledge on that, but just how the players are going to work this offseason because there are so many young guys coming off the bench, and also how well the starters can come into next season fully ready. And we've had conversations about like who that needs to be more than other people, but I think every part of that starting unit I think should be highly motivated and hungry and come August, come September, ready to kind of hit the ground running. So it should be fun. I'm excited to see what the word is. I saw Jamal in this Team Canada fit. Hopefully he looks, I don't know what I'm expecting from that, but we'll see what happens. Uh, final thoughts for you, Peter?
No, I pretty much agree with everything CT said. Just Paul George is the main domino. Hopefully he goes east and makes one West team weaker, and we'll see what plays out from there. Should be a fun few days, and then I look forward to going over the main free agency stuff with you next week. We got some special surprise guests coming up.
Yeah, it should be
Hype.
fun. Yeah. Well, if you made it this far, I appreciate you listening. You can find us online at me at Raymond Hackshaw, Peter at Bucketsense88, CT at CTFazio24. Yeah, We appreciate you listening, and as always, go Nuggets. We'll see you next time.